Hello everyone, once again it's me the Loremaster bringing you another instalment of 20-0 Tactics. And on today's episode we're going to look at getting the most out of your scout units. So to start today I want to begin by outlining one absolute fundamental principle with scouts that I see people miss all the time, and it's this: just because it can scout doesn't mean it should scout. And that is to say, obviously scouting's not a choice, you do have to scouts deploy if you have scouts, but that doesn't mean you have to go and park it over in your opponent's deployment zone or somewhere equally terrible if there's not an advantageous position. So by illustration, I'm going to bring us down to the table. You can see here this wonderful Empire deployment. This is incredibly strong. Now what I'd love to get at is obviously that Empire cannon. We all know that's a juicy target for my Wood Elf Scout units. However, as we can see here, there is basically nowhere that I want to put my scouts. I can't really be looking to go here. If I bring them over here and start trying to form into like a little dart 12 inches away, it's that 12-inch cap is going to mean that arc of sight, scout measurers to show you guys what we mean, is always very punishing. You can see straight away, 12 inches away, there's not really anywhere that I'm going to be able to go that they can't see to the edge of the board. So what I'm saying here is, this is just dreadful for me. This is really poor for me. So in this scenario, the best thing I can do with my scouts is to scout them out of the way. Now if I'm looking at this table here, this is a really advantageous position. So I'll slip them behind this building so they can't be seen, they can't be targeted very easily. And then the other unit I'll perhaps deploy back towards my own board area or in a much more reserved position rather than an advanced position. So that really is the first thing I want to stress to you guys, is don't feel like because you've got scout you have to throw your models up the table every time. Because if your opponent's deployed really strongly in an anti-scout fashion, then you're just going to waste them. There's really no mileage in that. Okay? Now, I'm going to move on to talk about some of the fundamentals of most scout units. So, it's always worth us remembering that if we scout a unit and we go first, we can't charge. Now, if we scout a unit and we go second, we can, but there aren't actually a great deal of scout units that want to be in combat. The obvious one might be Shades with great weapons from the Dark Elf Army book, but beyond that there aren't a great deal of them. And in general, you're going to find your units look a lot more like these guys here, which are units with bows, crossbows, shooting, damage that comes in with the scout element to cause some problems. So that's the next thing we need to consider, is we can't charge most of the time, and actually there's not very many scenarios we do want to charge in. Now what I'm going to do, very customary of me, I'm going to reset the table and we're going to start to have a look at actually getting the most then out of those scout moves when the opportunities present themselves. Okay, so we've established some don'ts with our scouts, if you will. Now let's talk about some do's. And my number one piece of advice for anyone who wants to use scouts and try to get the most out of them is really try to have a job in mind when you deploy the scouts. Like, what do you want them to do in this game? Now, most of the time, you're going to find their very best avenue of use is going to be to take out those kind of lone targets that are not very kind of intrinsically tough. And I'm going to talk about artillery, and you're going to be like, but that's quite intrinsically tough. But what I mean by that is, we're not talking about monsters. We're not talking about very high value characters that are well armoured. We're talking about softer targets like perhaps wizards, or in the case of the table setup now, artillery. Now you can see this is a much more kind of conventional shape. The Empire line has put itself into nice front line, cannon set slightly back, looks really wonderful. This is a scout's dreamland, ladies and gentlemen. So realistically we've got to watch here, but we want to pop our scouts somewhere like this. This is great for us, particularly if the shooting is poisoned. So I'm looking at chameleon skinks, I'm looking at potentially these deepwood scouts. I'm trying to think if there's a lot of other poison shooting scouts. Gutter runners, the immortal, the legendary. some of the best scouts in the game, in my opinion, sling gutter runners with poison. So you can see here that we've now got easy access to the cannon. We've got ourselves out of the arc of sights and the blocks. That's something we couldn't do with our first table setup. Miles out of the arcs here now. And we're pretty safe. Now, in this scenario, we're assuming that the Empire deployment zone's a bit deeper. There might be times where you look and find that you can actually tuck some scouts behind. Oh, just about. You can tuck your scouts just behind. Now, if they've got a random mover like this, and these were deployed a little bit further away, this could be a bit of a risk, but this is where pairing your scouts, having 2 units, this becomes a really strong tactic, and it can also then do a second job for us, which is, of course, to draw away enemy units, which is lovely, because you don't want that steam tank going over there. That's where all your lovely, juicy, powerful units are that do not want to meet a steam tank. You want him going the opposite direction. That's pretty good for you. It means he's not getting into the later game, gives you a chance to divide your opponent up, which is another fantastic element that scouts can bring to the table if they're deployed well. So, with those jobs in mind, in this instance, I'm looking at 2 potential jobs. The first one is to take out this artillery piece. This is really bread and butter for scouts. Turn 1, I'm going to move up. If I've got poison shots in particular, I'm going to throw a few shots that way. Move to here. If I haven't, I'm going to make sure that I'm in charge range, and a good charge. This is only 7 now. That's a lovely charge for us. We're going to get ourselves in, and we're going to make sure it happens. We might have even tucked ourselves this way a little bit so that it's not really possible for the random mover to come and get us as such. So you're seeing the elements. My first thought is threaten this artillery piece. This is bread and butter for scouts. My second thought might be to divide and conquer. Now, there are, beyond threatening artillery, you might want to threaten individual wizards. If I add, for some reason this guy decided he wasn't going to join that unit halberdiers today, thought it was better for his health. I'm not sure why. It's not about to be better for his health. He's about to get shot a lot. So again, these types of targets are very good. So identifying artillery, lone, what I call squishier characters are great. Great shout for scouts. And just being really aware of the danger that random move can present for a scout are really crucial elements. But there are a couple of additional jobs, if you like, that scouts really excel at. And the first one of those takes us right back to the very first 20-0 tactics video that I bought for you. And in fact, so does the second one now I think about it. And that first one is that good old-fashioned redirection, or that kiting game. Now for this, you're going to use the scouts in a slightly different way. You're going to advance them of your battle line, but they're not going to be so far advanced that they can get trapped out. Or you're going to place them out of the arcs on the 12 there, and you're going to shadow the enemy units. So as the enemy units move towards your back line, now I know I've not got any units there today, but oh, they're going to move up 8. These guys are going to shadow. I'm going to think really hard about the shadowing as well, as try not to get caught out if this steam tank pops its way up. They're going to shadow. They're going to get in as tight as they can across those turns, so that as the opponent gets into a position where they start looking at a really useful charge to them, maybe these guys here, you're going to go, no, I don't think so, buddy. And then all of a sudden that charge goes boop, bang, overrun goes past, and I've protected, now in this case, second unit scouts, but imagine that's something really juicy like a block of wild riders or something I equally care about. That's amazing. So this idea of redirection and shadowing is another really powerful employment of your scouts. And really what it involves doing is just making sure that you start 12 away, but you cut the distance as quickly as you can. And when you cut that distance, I have to stress this, you need to make sure that you're thinking about line of sight, arc of sight. That cutting that distance doesn't put you in a place where you can get easily hit by enemy ranged units, enemy magic missiles, or random movers. So that's really crucial. Shadowing, great. Make sure that you're not doing it in a way where it has no value, because right before the crunch moment when you're going to deliver the big redirection, the game-winning kite move, you can't, because they shot you off with some crossbowmen. Things you hate to see. And they are relatively resilient, a lot of scouts, to shooting, because they're very often skirmish and they get into that -1 territory. But believe me, magic missiles, not cool. And there's a lot out there that can take scouts out of play with shooting because it's got superior ballistic skill. Now, the second element and the kind of final crunch, we've talked about threatening those specific lone targets. We've talked really seriously about thinking long and hard about whether you can get poison on your scouts, about dividing up the enemy and trying to draw things away. It's just keep refreshing all those tactics. Staying out of arc of sight, absolutely pivotal. The last element where we can get a lot out of scouts is against random movers. It is a lot more tricky. A lot more tricky against random movers. And we've got to look seriously at our use of terrain. This is only going to work, and it comes right back to my initial point about making sure that your unit has a really clear job. If its job is to deal with this random mover, and that random mover is in the middle of the table, nothing around it, then you're going to need to think about having 2 units. You're going to need to think about having them tightly packed so that when this steam tank comes and knocking, the second one can do its job and push it out of the way. Now, if for some reason, I see this all the time with random movers, people do love it. I'm going to butt my random mover up near this bit of terrain. I like that because it's shielded on the side. Oh, no, ladies and gentlemen. This bit of terrain, if they've got scouts, becomes the ultimate shield wall. The ultimate shield wall. You can see. I'm there. Mr. Steam Tank. Boop, boop. Average sort of 10. Oh, it's all curtains, ladies and gentlemen. It's all tears before bedtime. We're in. And now everything else can start to work its way out of line of sight. If you're going to use it for this railroading role, you need to think very seriously about those 2 elements I've shown you. If it's in the middle of the field, you're going to require 2 regiments. One is unfortunately the Patsy regiment, if you will, the one that has to die, but give their lives nobly to redirect the monstrous steam tank. And if there's terrain, this is where your strength's going to come in against the random movers. Is this line of sight and kind of movement blocking terrain. It can't go through it. Wonderful. That's it. You can do it with 1 as long as you're using terrain to block you off. And you can do it with 2 guaranteedly by doing it the way I showed you. If you've got an open field, having them next to each other on the same and the angle you'd like to get rid of the steam tank or the random mover at. Now, you can always take a gamble as well, I suppose. You can always say, well, I'm about 13 away and he's probably not going to get 13 on his random move. I'm not. I'm about 15 away. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, look at that. That was absolutely... Still got it. He's still got it. Loremaster's still got it. About 13 away. He's probably not going to roll a 13 on 4 dice. He gets an 11, runs short. Oh, you love to see it. That's when you can get it off there. But you are now riding your luck. Now, this is what I call a precipice tactic. You may see me on battle reports all the time taking those gambly tactics when you're in the hole and you're struggling. But as a rule of thumb, if you want to use these like that, you want to either do it in pairs or you want to use battlefield terrain. And that really is going to be the maximum on scouts unless you're in a mission-based environment where sometimes certain missions the scouts can be really useful for. But otherwise, what you're looking at is making sure you don't throw them away for nothing. If there's no reasonable tactical advantage to be gained, don't put them in a dangerous position. Number 1. Number 2, think about the job, the target job. And for scouts generally, it's going to be hitting things like artillery or squishy individuals like wizards. It's going to be redirecting in the mid-late game with that shadowing tactic, or it's going to be railroading something important using the tactics we showed you. And beyond that, there's not a huge amount more that I can explain to you other than never be afraid to just stack them right in front of your deployment zone. You've got your nice 12-inch deployment zone here. Let's imagine these are the same army, everything's ranked up. There's nothing wrong with when you're done just scouting them in front of stuff and providing a bit of hard cover if you've got nothing better to do with them. And that's it. Scouts encapsulated in, I imagine, about a 15-minute video just for you at home. So thank you for joining me on another instalment of 20 Nil Tactics. Let me know what you think. If this brings you something different on the tabletop and you think, yeah, that was an amazing outcome, I'll let the Loremaster know. I generally, and so do the rest of the guys, we all love to hear those success stories. Make sure you head back to the Night of the Realm Mustering Ground, where you can check out all of our other exclusive content, including a lot of other 20 Nil Tactics videos, and I'll see you all next month on this segment. Remember to tag your friends and like, subscribe and share. Then head over to triplecrownwargaming.com and become a Knight of the Realm today.
What are you doing, mate?
You alright?
Do it for Warhammer!